able to be the Messiah doesn't mean they are the Messiah. You have to have some virtue to be the next king who is the heir to the Messianic throne. Anyways, that was it. I think I did a very good job with that.
You did. It was an exceptional job. I think as we're talking about the priests, we may as well skip over to a question by Listia, who was this is also posted on Facebook. It says, "I was a Christian and I'm now thinking about learning Judaism. And here is my question: were all the priests Levites? What's the difference between the Perushim, Pharisee, and the Levites? I'm curious because I don't think there's not much, if any, mention of the Levites in the so-called New Testament. No words, not mine. Except for John the Baptist's parents. Another thing that is bugging me is Jesus basically called the Perushim the descendants of the devil. I thought God chose the Levites to be priests. And if the Perushim are Levites, well, it's pretty messed up. And she thanks you for your time. So I think basically the question there is, are all priests Levites? And the Pharisees and Sadducees of the, we might as well go both ways, of the New Testament, how do they fit into the Levitical bracket?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. The first part of the question is the Levites are not mentioned in the Christian Bible. As it turns out, that's not correct. You'll find in the story in the book of Luke, chapter 10, as I said, that's a story of the Good Samaritan. You'll see that in fact a Levite is specifically there in Luke chapter 10, verse 32. You'll find the same thing as another Christian follower, whatever it is, in the book of Acts, chapter 4, verse 36. So that's just factually not correct. Levites are in the Christian Bible. It has nothing to do with Pharisees. Levite means that you were from the tribe of Levi. It had nothing to do with what you believed. It had nothing, it's like what race you are. If you're black, white, what family you're from has nothing to do with if you're an atheist or not, you're a Christian or not. The tribe you're from indicates what plot of land belonged to you. If you were a Levite, that would indicate that you did not have land assigned to you, but rather your job was to work in the temple. You were fully engaged and employed in temple work, devoted to the Jewish people. All priests were from the tribe of Levi. All priests were tribe of Levi. Generally speaking, the Kohanim, that's the word, Kohanim, are not called Levites, but actually there are many exceptions to that, because unique Kohanim who were very devout and zealous are called Kohanim that were Levites. You'll find that in the book of Ezekiel. But yes, all Kohanim are descendants from Levi, because essentially it's split off. The descendants of Moses were Levites. The descendants of Aaron are called Kohanim, are called priests, but we are all from the tribe of Levi. The word Pharisee comes from the word Perushim, and that is traditional Judaism. And that is, Perushim means those, the word really means those who are separated. But the key is the Perushim were those who believed in what's called classical Judaism today. All of classical Judaism today emerges from the Perushim. There are other groups, heretical groups, or heterodoxical groups, like you had the Sadducees, that was a heretical group. You had we don't know what the Essenes believed precisely. That's argued considerably, but they were almost certainly a heterodox group. Heterodox is kind of a synonym for heresy, but it's not as strong. But Perushim means, which are the Pharisees, it's the same thing, just different language, means that you believe in the written Torah, the oral Torah, you believe in all Tanakh is the Word of God, you believed in all the promises conveyed in the Jewish scriptures of life after death, the world to come, as described in the Bible, and the resurrection of the dead. That's what the Perushim believed. That's where the Christianity emerged from, the Perushim. The Sadducees are described as an elite group by Josephus and other historians. They did not believe in the oral Torah. They broke away from the oral tradition. They rejected it like later groups did. They did not believe in life after death. They were very much the proxies of the Romans in the temple and so on, but that wasn't really your question. So Pharisees is what you believed. That means what expression of Judaism did you embrace? So we can roughly say that the Pharisees, we can exchange that term for a contemporaneous term. Pharisee would be an Orthodox Jew. They are the same. Pharisaic Judaism and Orthodox Judaism are synonymous. Okay, so that will make it easier. Has nothing to do with what tribe you're from.
Another thing that's bugging this listener is that Jesus basically called the Perishim descendants of the devil. You are, you are sons of the devil. The devil is your father. I think the text.
John 8:44.
Right, which makes it a little bit awkward, because obviously the Christian reader is going to read this and then assume that Rabbinical Judaism is also, I suppose, satanic. And then what I find interesting is the use of the word devil in this text. I mean, traditional Jewish reading of the Tanakh, we don't have a god of this earth, a god of this world, except for the Creator. And yet in the New Testament, we're asked to engage in belief with the devil being this kind of free-reigning soul. He's not Hasatan in the New Testament. He's Satan in the New Testament. Can you talk a little bit about the differences?
Yeah. So in John chapter 8, we have one of the... It's really unfortunate that John chapter 8 was ever written. Because John chapter 8 is so venomous, it's so anti-Semitic, that that it would ultimately poison and pollute the mind of Christians for thousands of years, and untold crimes against the Jewish people be committed, because John 8 does say that the Pharisees and scribes, that the Jews, in fact, the word Jew is used there in the book of John more frequently than any other. That's how the people of Israel are called. All the Jewish people are called that. And incidentally, if you look carefully at John 8:22, right going all the way to our passage in John 8:44, the audience are called the Jews in John. So we are introduced to the Pharisees earlier in John 8 because of a story that actually didn't exist in the original book of John. Well, this might get weird for you, but the church manipulated the New Testament violently. Later scribes would insert things that weren't in the earlier versions. And the story of the adulterous woman who's brought before Jesus, and it was brought before the Pharisees and scribes, and Jesus is there, and she's brought there to be stoned, and Jesus, it's really a story that makes it into all the movies about Jesus, because it's a great and a very gripping story. And Jesus really is in a hard place, because the woman was caught in adultery, and the question is, well, what should be done with her? So Jesus is kind of in a no-win situation, as the story we're told is, that he can either say, stone her, and that would be comporting with what the Torah demands of an adulterous woman, but then he wouldn't be the Jesus of grace and love and forgiveness, so that wouldn't work either. So the story goes that Jesus says, let you who is without sin cast the first stone, and they all dropped their stones and walked away. I'm not going to get into this, the story would be ridiculous in Jewish law, but the story actually didn't exist in the original book of John. This story was inserted in later on. In fact, every Christian Bible that has a great annotation will tell you that so that's really where the Pharisees and scribes are introduced in John 8. It's really a much later Christian invention, a gripping story, no doubt, but it was not originally part of the book of John. No Christian scholar would disagree with what I've just told you. Okay, that's a later story. The story actually begins at the end of chapter 7. So that's where the Pharisees and scribes are introduced there. But as I said, go to John 8:22. And what we have there is the Jews are portrayed in the book of John in the most venomous way, that they are the devil, they are Satan. And we're going to get to the concept of Satan and the devil right now, because the idea in the Christian Bible is a pagan dualistic concept of Satan. That is, that Satan, we are told by the church, is an enemy of God, and therefore he's an enemy of Jesus, of course, and he's the chief blasphemer against God. That is opposed by the Jewish scriptures. Satan is not an angel in rebellion against God. Satan was created for the very purpose of tempting man away from God. But Christianity would adopt a dualism, and a dualism in this case is a Persian dualism, very much like Zoroastrianism, a Persian religious model. It's very possible, incidentally, that Achashverosh and Haman of the Purim story, we don't know this, but the reason why I suspect it, were in fact Zoroastrians. That's quite possible. But that concept that there's a God of good and a God of bad, a good God and a bad God, kind of something like what Gnostics would come to embrace. That's nothing to do with Judaism. Satan was created by God because something had to give us free will. And given that our default baseline is that we are good, that's who we are. Why are we essentially good? Why is our default baseline good? Is we're created in the image of God. Our natural instincts is to love God. We want to. That's built in. We're hardwired for that because we have a neshama. We have a soul from Hashem. So God had to introduce something, create an angel, Satan, and his job was to be an accuser, a seducer, to cast forth his blandishments so that we can have free will. Satan is not an enemy of God. He is a servant of God, and he is a blessing. If there were no Satan in the world, if we had no inclination to sin, there could be no virtue in the world. Virtue is only possible because Satan exists. Angels can't be virtuous. That's not possible. So now that's said, so the idea of Satan, that means, and what is tricky is Judaism is using the word Satan, it's spelt the same way. Christianity is using the word Satan, sounds the same, and there are similarities between the two, but in fact they're very, very different. So I want to examine what the curse means, you are of the devil, because this is a very, assault against the character of the children of Israel is really quite sophisticated. The notion that the Jews are the devil, and in fact we are the Antichrist would be a Jew. And remember Jerry Falwell said that a number of years ago. He didn't mean that really, people accused him of anti-Semitism. It wasn't an anti-Semitic thing, it just the Christian belief that of the end days, that the Antichrist will rise up and he'll be a Jew. That's all he meant, but people got all excited. But the key point is this: in Christian theology, in fact, in any dualistic theological system, Satan, who was an enemy of God, rather than the Satan we find in Tanakh, who actually does exactly what God tells him to do, as in the book of Job. If you asked any Christian, does Satan know the truth? Does Satan know that there's one God and who he is? The answer, of course he does. He knows the truth. In Christian theology, he was the highest of all the angels. He was the greatest of all the angels in Christian theology. He deliberately, knowing that Jesus is the Messiah, went to war against Jesus. So that's what the Jews are portrayed as. The Jews are not portrayed as ignorantly following this. The Jews are portrayed as deliberately being an enemy of Jesus.